So it's my privilege to introduce to you Joe Griffin, who happens to be right here. Before you applaud profusely, let me tell you a little bit. Joe began his career in digital marketing back in 1998 when he co-founded Submit a Website Inc., very early search and submission place. That's back when the blink tag was not yet deprecated. Did anybody get that?
That's right.
Nope. Okay, fine. No old developers here. More recently now, he is the co-founder of iAcquire and ClearVoice. Both are content marketing plays. Joe's a die-hard entrepreneur, a technologist, and a marketer, and is addicted to the screen, which he thinks is kind of sad. I guess you guys can make that determination. Please welcome Joe Griffin.
Thanks for having me, everybody. I've got about 55 slides in about 25 minutes, so we're going to have a nice brisk pace. We'll get through it. I'm going to talk to you guys about the future of content marketing. I know we've got a lot of agencies in the room, a lot of marketers. Some of this material you may already know, especially some of the early material, just going to set a little bit of a foundation and a stage. And one of the first things I want to talk about is obviously the mobile revolution being one of the key drivers of the future of content marketing. A couple key stats, just so you guys know. You may already know some of these. Smartphone usage in the last 4 years in particular has skyrocketed. In fact, all consumerism has changed in the last 4 years, and that's part of the case I'm going to be making today. Just on the stats side, about 62 million Americans owned smartphones in 2010, and then this year we've got about 163 million Americans, so more than about half of Americans now own smartphones. A scary statistic, which I think is a little bit unfortunate, but is what it is. Also back in 2010, people were on their smartphone about 30 minutes a day, and now on average we're on our smartphones about 3 hours a day, which is a little bit sad. The other big thing driving the changing world of content marketing is the Internet of Things. Internet of Things would be anything that's connected to the internet through Wi-Fi, through cellular data, GPS. So every cell phone, every computer is an Internet of Thing. Of course, the Nest, the Fitbit, all those different devices. This year, we've got about 14 billion devices in circulation globally, and that's going to be about 50 billion devices by 2020. What that means is that many of the products you buy today, including light bulbs, including scales, everything's going to be connected to the internet. One of the other things that is driving that huge spike in connected devices is the cost of sensors and the cost of that type of technology, which is going from about $1.50 today per device down to about 25 cents by 2020. All these things are driving a big shift in consumerism. That's ultimately what's changing the world and why we as marketers are making those changes. The things that we're seeing, again, the last 4 years, search, just with mobile accessibility, obviously continues to increase. Went from about 3.6 billion searches a day in 2010 to about 6 billion searches a day today. And then obviously social, not seeing as much of a change in terms of the adoption there, but obviously just the overall usage is going up. What this has done in the world of consumerism is it has changed the way that consumers interact with brands, and it's ultimately changed the decision journeys that consumers take. And I know we've got some agencies, you guys are probably familiar with this, but just a quick recap. McKinsey and Forrester Research really coined what they call the new consumer decision journey, and it's basically the factual and psychological evidence that consumers, which used to interact with a brand somewhere between 4 and 7 times about 10 years ago before they would make a purchase decision, now interact with the brand as much as 20 different times. And it's because of that mobile accessibility, the increase in search, the ability to tap into your social networks, that consumers now take a much more mature and a different decision process. And again, as marketers, we're going to get our arms around that, and we'll talk about that as we go. The other thing that we've seen happen, and this has been really over the last 10 years, and even more so in the last 4 years, is as these changes have occurred and as marketing has evolved, we're also seeing a total decline, and I would say a near collapse in the world of big media, specifically traditional journalism. America's newsrooms have gone from, again, about 2003, about 60,000 people were employed in the major newsrooms across America, and then going into just a couple years ago, that number now is below 40,000. So we've seen a 33% decline in newsrooms across America. And the sad thing about that too is when you look at that on a corrected basis in terms of the fact that there's more jobs today than there were in 2003, that's over a 50% decrease. And what we've seen, of course, is that big publishers like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, who have lost these individuals in those newsrooms, those people have been picked up by new digital publishers like Vice, Huffington Post, Politico, BuzzFeed, etc. And there's also been a big economy created of freelancers, which are starting to interact with brands more, and we'll talk about that as well. Did anybody see the New York Times innovation report, the 2014 innovation report that was leaked a few months ago? Was actually a really interesting report. If you haven't seen it, I would just search it, check it out. The New York Times put a task force together internally, and they elected about 50 people internally to kind of talk to their peers, look at the market, and ultimately come back to the executive leadership inside the Times to tell them how do they, what do they need to do to essentially get their readership back up, get more subscribers, get more traffic to their website. Because the fact is, sites like Huffington Post today have more traffic than the New York Times. So they put together a 92-page innovation report, and there was 2 or 3 big takeaways. The big takeaways really were that, number one, we don't do a whole lot to market our company, market that content once we put it online. The other big takeaway is that we need people that are dedicated to understanding audiences that interact in that content strategy process, so we're actually catering our content in a more strategic way. New York Times has always been really the gold standard in journalism, but they still haven't quite got the web yet. And there was a guy named Paul Barry, who was one of the co-founders of the Huffington Post, that was mentioned in this report, and he basically said, he kind of confirmed, hey, we put content on the internet and then we don't do anything with it when we put that content online. The same guy in the same innovation report also said, by the way, he was one of the co-founders of the Huffington Post, he said the big difference between us and the Huffington Post and other major digital publishers is that they're really marketing companies first and content companies second. And that's one of the major changes that we're seeing, is that the smarter marketers are winning the game, and that'll continue to be the case. Now, we've also run into a little bit of a content conundrum, because we all understand that there's more content consumption. We've got to market that content better, so we're all creating more and more and more content. And there's a company in the UK called Velocity Partners. They're really one of the better content, also not a plug for them, but one of the better content strategy companies out there. And I would recommend just to check their site out. They've got some good resources. But they put a PowerPoint out there they call The Deluge of Crap. And they talk about how we've got so much more content coming out all the time. We're just constantly being bombarded by crap, which is totally true. Fortunately, search is helping to fight that battle for us. Updates like the Panda update. About 3.5 years now, Google has had the Panda updates. They've come out, and it's been basically a war against thin content. So what obviously search wants to do is they want to provide the best experience for the customers. Brands, affiliates, and digital publishers keep pumping out more and more crap, and search is continuing to battle it down. That said, of course, and you guys know this, the people that will win that war, that post-deluge era war, are those that create precious content, remarkable content, something great. And I always say, like, instead of creating 50 pieces of content, let's just create 5 amazing pieces of content. We'll talk more about how brands are thinking about that as well. So the other really big important thing I want to note too about the future of content marketing is the effect that big data has on content, on consumerism, on the content we're creating, and ultimately on segmentation. The big data industry is one of the fastest growing global industries right now. I think it was 2010, it was about a $3 billion industry. And then going into next year, it's a $17 billion industry. Again, it's one of the fastest growing global markets. And big data is ultimately paving the way for marketers. Companies like Airbnb is a good example. It's paving the way for these companies to do better segmentation. Big data is enabling them to better understand their customers. It's enabling them to tap into exchanges and marketplaces where other companies like Facebook and Twitter and social networks are sharing their data, which allows them to be better marketers. Other big data providers include companies like Nielsen, Experian, Axiom, which are providing ISP level data, survey level data, etc. And what it's going to allow us to do ultimately is just serve better content to our customers. So what we're seeing marketers do as they're getting their arms around better segmentation, better data, they're taking this purchase funnel, which has been around it was created in 1898. It's over 100 years old. And there's lots of different versions of this that you guys have probably seen. This is just kind of our version. But what they're doing is they're starting to segment customers and this purchase funnel and content. It's saying, let's create this type of content for this stage of the purchase funnel, maybe the awareness stage. Let's create this type of content for familiarity, and so on and so forth. And they're getting better with segmentation and smarter in how they go about that process. All this is leading towards programmatic ad buying and a lot of other new media, which I'm about to get into. But I wanted to talk about programmatic ad buying in particular, because big data really helps to power that. Some of the exchanges that are kind of sharing this big data with one another are display, okay? So you've got major display networks like DoubleClick and others that are working together to share data in this kind of cloud, right? Which then becomes this kind of big data cloud. On the mobile side, mobile data usage, which is being shared, social data usage, which is being shared, video data, and other type of app data, right? So these layers are coming together, and companies, and this is a picture by a company called Radium One, which is a programmatic ad buying company. These types of companies are accessing these big data layers. They're partnering with brands to help better segment and serve content to people in a more programmatic way, right? So that, and I'll use Airbnb again as an example, so companies like Airbnb can say, let's target females between the ages of 25 and 35 that have an income between $50,000 and $100,000, that are college educated, that have booked a plane ticket sometime in the last 6 months, right? That data actually is not that hard to target today. It's going to continue to get better and better and better, so we can target those people in the places where they live. Other new media, right? So the other new media that's coming, probably the biggest one's internet TV. Kind of quietly along the same path as more people have gotten smartphone adoption. About 4 times more people have smartphones today than they did 4 years ago. A similar curve we see in smart televisions, right? So a few years ago, only about 50 million Americans owned a smart TV. And they're saying over the next couple years, about 250 million Americans will own a smart TV, at least one smart TV. So almost every household will have at least one smart TV in it within the next 3 years. You can't buy a new TV today that's not a smart TV. What that's going to do is it's going to enable that segmentation, big data, programmatic ad buying, so that the television commercials that you see every day are served specifically to you. And that will get more and more sophisticated over time. Obviously, everyone in this room knows that was coming. We've all known that was coming for a long time. The interesting thing is how fast it's coming. It's coming next year. It's already here, next year and the year after. And by probably 2017, probably 75% of every advertisement you see on TV will be served to you. And you'll be part of some cluster. You might be part of a really big cluster, you might be part of a really small cluster. And that type of accessibility will exist. There was a panel that was done at Advertising Week last year where all the major agencies, the top 5 holding companies, were on a panel. They had essentially a representative from each of the trading desks. They had these trading desks that go out and buy all the television advertising. And they surveyed them and said, as of last year, how much of the television advertising that you buy today would you consider to be programmatic ad buying? And on average, about 5%, maybe 7% of what they buy today is programmatic. Because there's some programmatic out there, and much of the digital television advertising is programmatic already. They all said by next year, 2015, 50% of the media they would be buying on TV would be programmatic. Now, that's a very ambitious goal. That kind of shows you where they're at, though, and kind of what their marching orders are. They all want to rapidly get to that level. In order for them to do that, though, a few things have to happen. Number one, there's got to be the technology platforms in place to enable that type of programmatic ad buying. There's got to be the trading desks where they can come into a platform and have an auction-based system to buy that advertising. Those platforms are being built currently. Some of them exist now. There's going to be 3 or 4 different types. The other things that has to happen is the major media providers, the Disneys of the world, the Tribunes, they've got to elect to participate. They've got to make their inventory available to these buyers, which they're working on today. In that same conference, they all said, within the next 12 months, we either will have started or have completed our programmatic ad buying platforms to enable that type of work. So, again, we knew it was coming. It's pretty much next year and the year after. We'll see it everywhere. The other big emerging, I'd say, media technology is native advertising. This is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. Companies like Outbrain, Taboola, own this space. Companies like Forbes and BuzzFeed derive most of their revenue, or a significant portion of their revenue today, from native advertising. And native advertising is certainly not a new concept. It's been around for a long time. We all know that. The idea that we will kind of slickly integrate an ad into an editorial stream or an editorial kind of component of our journal or our publication has always been around. But what's really changed is the technology and the participation from the publishers. Fortunately, Google hasn't really gotten into this space too much yet, and I actually talked to someone who I talked to the managing director for finance on the Google AdWords side. He said they weren't really getting into native advertising anytime soon, which I kind of like. I like the fact that we can get some smaller players in there to just, kind of put some of these relationships in place. The reason why native advertising is hard, though, especially when you look at it from a technology perspective, is that it basically has to support all the different types of editorial formats that these publishers have. And if you look at a company like Adweek in this example, they actually do it more manually on their end. So some of these companies you have to go to direct to do native ads. Others you can go through platforms. But one thing I wanted to just point out with Adweek is that they're a little bit of a victim of why some people don't like native advertising. Over here on the right-hand side, you can see it says editor's picks in the top right, this arrow up here if you can't see it. And typically editor's picks means not advertising, right? Editors don't typically pick an ad. In this particular case, it's probably mislabeled. That's what gets native advertising in trouble. You can also see on the right side, or you maybe can't see the second arrow, it says, what is the future of email marketing? And right above it, it says brand share content. And that's not clearly marked as an ad. Now, in this particular case, you actually stay on the Adweek site, and then the next page you hit, and this was content created by Campaign Monitor. They did a really good job. This is why I like native advertising. You can see it, you can barely see it, but it says sponsored there. But what's happening with native advertising is that, it's supposed to be hard to tell. That's the point. It's supposed to be hard to tell that it's an ad. It's supposed to be such good content that it fits into that editorial stream in a way that makes you feel like it's a good experience. It might even, properly done native advertising may even be better than maybe better content than editorial itself. But at the end of the day, it still has to be marked as paid. But I think this is a really great medium. Every agency in this room should be thinking about it. There's just a lot of application for it. The other kind of native advertising we see a lot is content discovery. It's almost not native advertising. This is really where like the Outbrains play. You see a lot of this stuff at the bottom of the publishers, like You May Also Like or Stories from Around the Web. I think there's room for that, but if there's any brands in this room can tell you, this stuff doesn't convert very well. It's good at just getting eyeballs on the page. You can get traffic for 10, 15 cents. It's higher quality than StumbleUpon, but it's probably not that much higher. It might help to create a cookie pool, something like that. Some of the other native advertising you see a lot is the stuff you see in social. I think they do a pretty good job of this. Facebook's trying to do it better. I think Twitter's doing a really good job. You'll see in Facebook a lot of times how like when your friends like a brand, it'll say like, John likes this brand, it's a box. That's typically not paid. It's just sharing things that your friends like. The paid versions look almost the exact same. It just says suggested post, right? So it's still native because it's still fitting that same editorial stream, just marked as paid. Twitter in particular does a really good job. I'm actually a big fan of Twitter advertising. I would just check that out, some really good stuff there. One of the cool things about Twitter, and Facebook shares this as well, you can go to Twitter and there's probably 3 or 4 different ways you can buy ads on Twitter. But they do something kind of cool. They have like this kind of invisible creep line that they don't cross. And maybe some of you guys have read about like the creepiness of advertising. It's just something I talk about sometimes. There's kind of this invisible creep line that everyone kind of doesn't want to cross. So Twitter has established, okay, these are the 2 or 3 things, or maybe 4 things we can do to serve ads to our audiences without crossing that line. But we still want to maybe enable marketers to cross that line, but let's not do that direct. So they have this series of kind of Twitter preferred partners that exist that can advertise on Twitter in ways that you can't do direct. And I think it's just, it's good to know that those things are out there. There are ways to advertise on Twitter that you can't do direct. One of them, which I think is worth mentioning, and I think I like it, it's certainly highly targeted, but through their certified partners, you can serve your advertising to specific people. So if you go to Twitter Direct and want to place an ad, you can say, I want to serve ads, and you can put a name in. And what it will do is it'll look at that person's followers and that kind of the group that person lives in, and maybe what that person talks about, and use some intelligence to try to serve ads to people like that, right? You can do that through Twitter, but you can't, let's say, go to LinkedIn, get a list of the top 100 content marketing guys, and let's say only people that are directors of content marketing. You can't take that list, get their Twitter handle, and say, I only want to serve my ads to these 100 people. You can do that through their partners, though, right? So you can actually get that granular through Twitter's partners. So I would really look into that, and I think that's something that we should all do. Native advertising and video. I don't want to spend too much time here, but obviously you guys have seen this. It's going to continue to be more prevalent. Obviously, it's worked its way into all of our shows. You guys probably watch shows, and all of a sudden, like you see the guy driving a Lexus like 5 times. That's obviously native advertising. I'll mention retargeting too, and I only want to mention it for a few reasons. I think that there's an evolution here too, and it's very much powered by that big data layer. We've got the typical type of retargeting is just someone comes to your website, you cookie them, you're working with a retargeting player or a retargeting advertising partner that will serve display ads to them on other websites, right? That's just the basic type of retargeting. The retargeting in the future of content marketing is retargeting using big data, where you can do a lot of different things. I want to use Twitter again because I think they just continue to do cool things and push the boundaries. This is an example of where someone visits a website. In this particular case, it's a Hawaii Hotels website. They visit a Hawaii Hotels website, and the company, the Hawaii Hotels website, is working with a Twitter partner, okay? They cookie that person, and that data is then fed up into this big data cloud, okay? And because that data is fed into the big data cloud, they can then match up this person with other data that they know about this person, which is also fed in the cloud. And somewhere along the way, some of that data can say, hey, this is that person's Twitter handle, right? And now, in this particular case, you can then serve your ads to the person that came to your website. You can serve your ads to them on Twitter, okay? But that person never gave you their Twitter handle. They didn't give you their Twitter handle. You only know what their Twitter handle is because you're participating in this anonymous big data layer where you've got this information, right? And that's a little bit weird, and you couldn't do that 2 or 3 years ago, so it's really new stuff. That applies to email too. I'm certainly not a fan of spamming people in email. In fact, you can't do that. You would be breaking certain guidelines. But you can email someone one time. You can legally email anybody you want one time. And there's companies like Retargeter that will do that for you, where you can sign up with them, they'll take that data, they'll feed it up into this big data layer, right, that exists, and now you can be that same Hawaii Hotels website and email somebody even though they never gave you their email. And the accuracy on that's about 30% right now, which is a little too high in my opinion. The other thing you can do too, and this is just kind of an evolution, it's just something I put as my stupid quote, but an evolution of this is obviously connecting someone from their PC or their laptop to their cell phone, right? That same big data layer, knowing that, let's say I went to that Hawaii Hotels website, and then being able to connect me from my laptop to my cell phone, right? And that's already happening in kind of limited phases, and that'll continue to happen more. The other big thing just to note too, online and offline convergence. So as we continue along this same path, historically companies have done, they've set up cameras, they've utilized Wi-Fi to understand what is the behavior inside the retail presence, right? So people walk into a store, and those stores want to know what you do. They want to know, where should we put these kiosks? They want to know what was your path in the store, right? They want to optimize that experience. And that's happening today, and that's been around for a while. But the one thing that's new is the usage of beacons. These are powered by low energy Bluetooth. These are Bluetooth devices that connect to your cell phone. They are connected, because they're connected through Bluetooth, they're a lot more accurate than GPS. GPS can do things like, if you go into, let's say Cabela's as an example, which is a client we work with. If you go into a Cabela store, with GPS, they know that you're going into a Cabela store, right? But if you walked into Fashion Square Mall and went into a store there, that's difficult to know with GPS because it's too small of a location. With Bluetooth technology, not only do they know that you're entering stores, including small stores, they know where you go. And companies like Cabela's, companies like Nordstrom's are doing this today. They're connecting you from your website experience to the store experience. And they're doing that in a few different ways. Big data plays a role. There's an opt-in process that they can work with you on. Also a process where you don't opt in. And I'll use the Cabela's example where I can go on the Cabela's website today, walk into their store tomorrow, and they know that I'm in their store. And if I've opted into this process, using beacons, they can pinpoint me accurately enough where if I looked at the GoPro page on their website and I get close to the GoPro section in their store, they can alert me on my cell phone, they can send me coupons. That's gonna be very commonplace. We'll see that within the next year. 1, 2 years from now, that'll start to be commonplace. It'll probably get annoying. You'll be opting out, you'll be getting alerted a lot. Of course, brands understand all these things. They know that content is the future. 78% of CMOs say that content is the future of marketing. They're going to use big data. They're going to use advanced segmentation. They're going to create better content, and they're going to become publishers. They're already doing it. And we talk about, you guys, obviously in the industry, everyone talks about brands becoming publishers, and it's for those reasons. Some of the early adopters, I think, just to give a shout out to some brands, American Express with Open Forum, have done an amazing job. Red Bull is nothing more than 2 cans. One has sugar in it, one doesn't. But they're an amazing brand because they're a content brand. They're one of the best. GoPro, which I mentioned as well, a great content brand. And Google, which I think as well just continues to do really cool things to share content. And we advertise there not just because the audience is there, but they've done a really good job of continuing to bring us back. One thing you're seeing now too, I think this is something that every agency in this room will leverage if you're not already today, is what I call the content stack. I didn't make that up, but it's called the content stack. It's the idea that a lot of these things that CMOs need, in fact 70% of marketers were recently surveyed by the Ultima Group, and they said that they lacked a consistent and integrated content strategy across their organization. It's one of the biggest challenges that brands face. Brands have PR departments, they've got brand departments, social departments, search departments. They're trying to connect those things. And what they found is that there's really some key things that they need to connect. The audience and their targeting across the organization, analytics, the creation of content, the distribution of content, the curation of that content, the workflow that connects everybody, the optimization both for SEO and for testing, multivariate testing, the legal implications and legal review and overall integration. And so there's a lot of emerging content marketing platforms that are out that are trying to connect all these dots. And most of them are kind of, they kind of cover 2 or 3 of these areas, but they don't cover them all. So what we're seeing is one company covers 3 of them, another company covers 3, and they're being consolidated. Adobe, IBM, these guys are buying them up and they're bringing them together, and we'll see the content marketing platform might replace a lot of the existing platforms. Trying to wrap up here. Again, the kind of decentralization of big media and big journalism has led to people now getting some of that power back. The other thing that's great is when brands become publishers, they can monetize content better than regular publishers can. Brands make a lot more money on content than regular publishers. So we're seeing influencers making a lot more money. We're seeing the cream kind of rise to the top in terms of the content creators. They're starting to really get back into that process. Just note a couple people on YouTube. Some of these people are making $40,000 a month, $100,000 a month working with brands. And then of course some people just like this PewDiePie is the biggest channel on YouTube, making about $7 million in the last couple of years. I think we'll see more of these platforms continue to become more important. FameBit, Tap Influence, Adly, Instabrand. They're out there recruiting influencers. They're building networks, right? Instabrand, as an example, kind of owns Instagram. If you want to if you're a brand, you want to get your story shared by someone on Instagram, you would go to one of these companies. Some other places you can go just to find your own influencers to create content or share content. I really like Follower Wonk. Kind of one of the best places to go to find influential people on Twitter. My company, ClearVoice, has created a place you can go to find the top content producers, the writers, the journalists in any sector. You can see by website, or you can type keywords in. You can deep dive and do an analysis of due diligence on what are those people creating, what's their social proof, how well is that content being shared. So check that out. And just to wrap up, I think really four big ingredients, and I don't think these things are going away. The big data and analytics layer is at the beginning. That will continue to be at the beginning, and will also be at the end. The audience segmentation, what we do today is it's amateur hour compared to what we're going to do in the next few years. Content strategy development obviously finally kind of re-emerged. This used to be called marketing communications. Now we call it content strategy. Of course, media distribution, not going anywhere, and it just feeds right back into big data and analytics. That's it.
We have about a minute left. Any one person with a burning question that I have to have answered right now? Raise your hand. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, you talked about content being precious and that kind of content winning, but I thought immediately about click farms. Things like BuzzFeed and Bleacher Report is a really good example where slideshows and bulleted lists dominate. How do you reconcile those types of sites and their success with the simultaneous?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and that is a little bit of an oxymoron, and I'm glad you asked it because it's something I think about a lot too. And when I try to wrap my arms around what is precious content, I think it's not just about the individual piece. I do think that creating individual content pieces like what BuzzFeed's doing, who have proven that this kind of just chunk a bunch of cool images in there and some snappy headlines, it draws people in. So I think the idea of creating precious content isn't just about the individual piece, but a lot of it's about the overall strategy. And maybe some of those pieces are the way to go because they're going to convert best and draw eyeballs. But creating precious content might also be about having a series of those pieces or a strategy that connects them. So I think it's about the broader strategy of content creation. I think that's a great point, yeah.
Thank you again, Joe. Appreciate it.